Hey, welcome everybody. This is John Paul Meduchin, Dr. Speed Selling. This is Raging Verbalist number 115. And this is a very special one. We've never had one of these before, but before we get started, of course, let me just kind of bring everybody up to speed. Of course, Raging Verbalist, you can see us on YouTube every Friday and also on our Facebook, which is the Position to Win book Facebook page, which is, of course, my book, which is always important. And of course, with me, as always, is the lovely Sandra. So if you ever want to ask a question, toss a question, go to the Facebook and put it there. Be nice, because Sandra will be reading them and she has sensitive ears. Trust me on that one. All right. So Sandra, hello and welcome.
Hello. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Excited. We got our first guest. I mean, this may be, this is just the first of who knows how many. We're going to have to think about other guests that we might be able to conjure up. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest, somebody who I've now known for, and Tom, I was going back and checking on this. So I think it's like we're on 12 years that we've known each other, going on 13 or something like that. So the one and only, and Tom is a very smart guy as far as Facebook, wrote a Facebook book with Perry Marshall. And that book is in continuous publication since 2011, all kinds of editions and versions. Really super smart guy and a good friend of mine, Tom Malash. Tom, welcome to the show.
John, thank you very much. And Sandra. And yeah, it's at least 12 years because we knew each other before the book came out. So like the book is not my grounding in history, 2011. The first, in my opinion, high quality book on Facebook advertising, because I read every one out that came out before that. And they weren't that good. So I think we really hit it out of the park in 2011.
Well, excellent. All right. So today, just so everybody knows, the format is that Sandra is the inquisitor, the questioner, and she's going to ask us questions. And of course, we're going to have our guest get asked the question first, and then I will, I'm sure, chime in. One of the things that Tom and I talked about the pre-call was that he and I could riff on this stuff for hours, but we have a limited amount of time. If we went too long, then we'd be Joe Rogan, hopefully, but we're not. So, all right, Sandra, kick us off. Separate these two and get in there.
All right. So, Tom, when did you first become aware of Facebook?
So I became aware of Facebook, I think it was like in January of 2005. I was building software, and this thing was being talked about all over the place called Web 2.0. And literally myself and my staff, I'm like, let's stop all the work we're doing. Let's take a month off. Let's go out and experience. Let's just spend a month literally at work playing with all the tools that we could get a hold of that were out there. And so we were on, early versions of Reddit, and Facebook was one of those Web 2.0 companies that we looked at. We weren't allowed to join because you had to be a college student with in one of the core colleges. So that's when I became aware of it. And then of course wasn't able to fully join for like another year and a half when they finally allowed anyone with a valid email address to join. So a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Well, all right. So my statement is that I first became aware of Facebook when MySpace, if anybody remembers what that is, when MySpace was rocking it out. And I just kept running into people and I kept thinking, how are these guys going to monetize it? And how they did is they found a big sugar daddy, and I think they're sugardaddy.com, but I think it's a different kind of site. But anyway, they found somebody to give them, what was it, $100 million or $200 million? Rupert Murdoch, I think, is the one who bought it out. And of course, that was supposed to be this new social media platform. And I became aware of that. And then once I became aware of that, somebody said to me, oh, yeah, that's already passé. I mean, I barely even was aware of it. There's this new thing that's coming called Facebook. And the first thing I did was I started, as Tom talked about, he wrote the first meaningful book. The first book that I ever read about Facebook was absolutely garbage and trash, because it didn't tell me anything other than how wonderful it was that people are going to be able to connect. They're going to do all these wonderful things. And, frankly, it just didn't tell me what I could do with it, and the first thing I say as somebody who's a marketer and a seller is, how do I exploit this for money? And it almost was like, I don't know, written as if they were, in some communist country or something, Romanians who said, during Ceausescu, well, we don't do anything for money. We just do it for party, because it didn't seem like there was any money thing into it. And I really became aware when I ended up, understanding that Tom was out there and he was working on this book. But more importantly, I saw you speak in Maui, and that was interesting because you started talking about buying clicks and buying and finding and touching people for some tiny fractions of pennies. We probably shouldn't even tell anybody about that, because it might create suicidal behavior in those who are involved in Facebook today. But I was just astonished, and I left that event, which I was there and I spoke at it and all that other stuff. But I was just astonished that more people weren't utilizing this resource. It was just amazing. So that was kind of like my kickoff. I was later to the party, but I was just fascinated because I was wondering, where is this thing going to go? And more importantly, how's this ever going to work?
So what has been the most surprising change as you've used Facebook?
So I think almost everything about Facebook surprises me. The whole life of the company. Like the very first time I used Facebook and to advertise before we wrote the book, before I connected with Perry, that I ran an ad with no experience in the platform or anything, and I was getting like a 50% conversion rate on these tiny ads. And by that I meant if they clicked on the ad, I was converting half of the customers into my program. And then just along the way, as we got more surprises. We were surprised when somebody was like, "Oh, I'm getting leads so cheap that literally they don't show me how much I'm paying per click, because this is early days. You probably won't get this now, because they didn't have a fraction that small for what they were paying per click." And maybe the most recent surprise is how political the platform has become in terms of censorship and, in my opinion, sort of trying to isolate 70 million, at least Americans, who are likely on it. And so I'm surprised by every step and every choice they make, and continue to find the platform interesting and engaging.
So in my case, what I always found interesting about Facebook is other than Tom and Perry and some of the acolytes that they had, is how many people I met who told me, because again, I had clients and I'd say, okay, we want to advertise this on Facebook. And people would say, oh yeah, we can do that. And then we would run an ad, and then we would get banned, and then we would get shut down. And then, there wasn't like, 1-800 call Facebook for mercy. There wasn't any way to actually get this thing figured out, because you were just like cast aside, you're tossed away. And I kept saying, well, that isn't right. That isn't what we want to do, because of course, Facebook is one of those kind of really interesting amorphous creatures that crawls out of technological ooze, in my opinion, and does the following thing. They don't like the fact that they have to make money. So in some ways, they don't want to help you make money. Just like as Tom and I have gotten to know each other, and he's helped me out and helped clients of mine out with Facebook. But it's like sometimes you just go, well, how come they don't do it like Google does it? Or how come they don't do it like Amazon does it? And it's almost like they sit there and go, how do we repel customers from actually making this work? I mean, I often wondered if I had been bright enough to, when I started talking to these guys, had I bought Facebook stock, probably wouldn't be on this right now.
Nope.
But I can tell you that it's just astonishing how many things that just I looked at. And I guess the thing that I find most surprising is that, it's about engagement, but most importantly, they have some other agenda, and I'm not quite sure what it is. Having watched Mark Zuckerberg go and speak in Congress, I wonder if it's one of those, situations where he really is like kind of a space alien or something. I mean, the movie that they had about it, which people told me, well, I don't know if the movie was right or not. If you watch the testimony that he gives to Congress, you find out that the movie gave him far more personality and less calculating than he really is. I mean, he seems like a very calculating guy. And I have, we'll have predictions later on, but
Uh,
I think that there's a danger for Mr. Zuckerberg if he doesn't watch this whole let's toss people out, let's do this, let's do that, because once one starts deciding to be the truth police, lots of luck, because there's a lot of things that you can, if you absolutely live by that standard, you will die by that sword.
So is Facebook still relevant in today's world?
I think it's very relevant in today's world. If you're selling B2C or B2B, it's probably still the best place. And most people don't realize this, the best place to get in front of folks. A typical business buyer is spending like 2 or 3 hours a week on Facebook. In comparison, they're maybe spending 27 minutes on LinkedIn. So, and we've always said this, we said this when we wrote the first book, people don't go to Facebook to think, they go to Facebook to stop thinking. Right? It's a social outlet, but they're there, and your business customer is there, and your business customer, whether it be a consumer or another business, will click on something in their feed if it's intriguing enough to them. And when they click on it, you better make sure you're amusing them, right, and entertaining them, not just informing them or trying to sell them. But I mean, I think Facebook's doing their best to drive people off their platform, but they're still there. They're there by the billions. They're there in both political parties still. They're there poking around for hours a week, and you can get an ad in front of them and you will click on it. And I'm including is Facebook relevant, Instagram and the other platforms that they've put up that allow you to get in front of the next generation. So yeah, highly relevant from a business point of view and a marketing point of view. Will they always be? No, but people still advertise on TV. Right now, Facebook is probably the single best place still to advertise, maybe after Google search, if you have a very specific thing to advertise. So yeah, as relevant as ever, and people should still be paying attention to it.
One of the things that I always say is that relevancy, it comes down to costs. So if you can figure out how to control your costs, and you can put up, as Tom says, an intriguing story, and you can navigate the waters and not get yourself banned and kicked off, then I think you're in pretty good shape. But the thing is that I, maybe Tom will share with us how not to get kicked off. I think how people get kicked off is because they become very blunt and very direct, and they say, I'm trying to sell you something, and they shout it out, and that just so offends the very fine hairs. So inside of your ear, you have these fine hairs that kind of tell you kind of what's going on. Well, Facebook has like an entire group of these digital fine hairs that once they get a little ruffled, they boot you off the thing. So I think it's relevant, but you better be very aware of these things. And for anybody who's out there and says, John, but I don't want to give up my principles, and I'm all this. In business, you have to think in terms of how to be a mercenary and how to go out and get your message out and deliver your message, whichever way you have to deliver a message. And I think that it's ridiculous that people will reject a certain media just because they don't believe that these people support whatever they're doing. The question is, are your customers there, and can you get to them, and can you talk to them?
So how much bigger can Facebook get given the current climate?
So I'm gonna read the current climate that Facebook is trying to actively piss off 70 million or so of their users. Most of them are still staying on, and they're spending time there. I don't think Facebook itself is going to get bigger. I think the Silicon Valley and the social media empires that are out there are really demonstrating that we need something else. I don't think something else is yet a new Facebook or yet a new Twitter that supports more political freedom, but it's all owned by one or two people, and they're going to be honest this time, or fair brokers. So I don't think we've seen yet what's really going to replace Facebook and Twitter, but we get some sense of it. And when we begin to look at blockchain technologies, that'll be really a different model that unseats it. In the meantime, Facebook remains relevant. We should pay attention to it as advertisers and marketers or anyone trying to get a message out. And will probably even continue to grow for a while because Facebook has a big pile of money, just tens of billions of dollars. And they will buy the next small social media platforms that continue to reach younger audiences and new generations. And they've continued to do that, spending tens of billions of dollars to buy access to new technology. Instagram was an early one, WhatsApp. So they're going to continue to invest money to get whatever the next generation is playing with, or whatever, if they can buy it for 10 or 20 billion bucks and give you access to those eyeballs, they will. So expect it to remain relevant for a long time.
I think Facebook is going to see a lot of changes over the next few years. And I think that Facebook is smart enough that they keep attacking themselves in a way. They don't have, Facebook Junior and Facebook, 17 and Facebook something else. So I think they really understand that, Instagram was a good buy. WhatsApp was a good buy. I mean, and they just say, oh, by the way, WhatsApp, 16 people. Yeah, let's just peel off $1 billion. By the way, that was in stock, people. See, whenever somebody sees these things, they always give me it as if somebody came over and, drove up the minivan and they stacked in bags of cash. Those are my Vegas days. That isn't how business gets done. And I said that before, of course, Microsoft gave somebody $76 billion for Activision. So, it is crazy out there. So just keep that in mind. But I think Facebook is going to do that. But Facebook understands something that's very important, which all of you really need to understand. And I'm going to help you right now to understand it even better and give you the tools necessary to make this work. And in fact, one of the most important things that you need to do is go out there and most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize it. Position to Win. And you can go to positiontowinbook.com and pick it up there. You say, hey, I want to have it signed. I'll sign it. If you want me to sign it a certain way, I may, unless it's really weird or wonky. It's also available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. It's also in every digital format from Apple Books, Kindle, and Nook. And then on the other side, we have Remote Work for a Better World, which, by the way, Tom and I are both on this co-authoring mammoth that we did. And that's because we saw the pandemic coming. I actually have to give Tom credit. He saw the pandemic coming weeks before I did. I did not buy enough toilet paper because I would have made a fortune selling it to other people. And remember, you can buy it by the roll, but sell it by the sheet. So you can always keep that in mind. So just remember, go out and pick up. Most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. It's just audience.
So I'm gonna pitch my favorite subject to talk to people about, whether you're doing, because I consult companies that do marketing and advertising, that do HR, that do software development, and no matter what you're doing, whether you're implementing a new advertising campaign, or you're trying to change the way you hire people, or you're looking for new ways to build software or better ways to run your team, the general label that this comes under as in the industry is agile. And that I've been involved in the agile movement for over 20 years. I've brought John Paul in to help consult with me for some of my larger clients when we're dealing at the executive level. And I have a book on ceremony that I just like to promote, and you can find it at tommalosh.com and ceremony. And it's a very gentle book. It's an introduction to a new way of thinking about how you structure and do work. And it's available on Amazon.com. And I'd love for anyone here who enjoys what we're talking about to take a look at Ceremony, a new way to think about work, a new and an ancient way, which is part of it. It's also a very tiny book. So it's a very light and easy read. So I think it's a lot of fun for folks.
Well, and don't forget that Tom not only wrote this seminal book about Facebook advertising, and I happen to have a copy that he signed for me at one of my events. So I will shamelessly point it out and bring it up. But it's out in the what edition is it?
I have like behind me, I think three of the 4 editions. So I think it's in the 4th edition that's out now. But I did, if you go by The Ultimate Guide to Facebook Advertising, it's a great book. New team members have come on each year to add new insights and new inspiration. But I had to bring this to show. I don't know that you can buy this, but this is the Japanese version of The Ultimate Guide to Facebook Advertising. And I'm pretty sure that's because that's my name apparently in Japanese right there.
Wow.
And that's from the 2011 edition. I can't read a word of it. I'm guessing it was really good because they took it from my book. But one of the things I'm most sort of excited about was receiving a copy of my book in Japanese.
There you go. It's a test. You say to people, "Hey, I wrote a book," and you hand it to them, and they go, "Hey, this looks pretty good. I really like chapter 3." Excellent. All right, Sandra, keep us on track. We have a tendency to
We'll
drift
go
on
off
this.
forever if you let us.
All right. So given the current constraints, is Facebook a social media company or an advertising vehicle?
Yes, that's my answer. Like, absolutely. So my position to anyone who's clever enough to be listening to the Raging Verbalist and involved in the world of John Paul is you better be thinking about it as a advertising vehicle. If you're not thinking about it that way, you're missing one of the still greatest opportunities of a lifetime. Still one of the best, the most affordable places to go get eyeballs. They're all there. Your customers are there, whether a business or customer, or as John Paul calls some, business customer. Won't even go into that and let him do that on other shows. They're all there, and you can spend very tiny amounts of money to test your messages and see if you can reach them. You can spend as little as $50 and run a really great experiment and see if you're reaching and adjust your message, adjust your vocabulary, adjust everything you're doing. So sure, as far as everyone else, it's sort of like TV. There's certain of us who are like TV was something passively consumed. And so for us, it was an entertainment media. The people who really understood TV considered it an advertising media.
So as a social media, let's talk about that just for a little bit, Tom. So for social media, this is where it's kind of gotten a little intertwined, because previously you could say things on there that other people may not like or believe, but it was your opinion. So it was your opinion, and we have free choice and all that. But it seems like today we are seeing a bunch of I guess they have like in Minority Report, they have a whole bunch of brains that sit around in jars and try to figure out what's going on from the social media side. Is that some of the dangers that they're faced with right now?
I think it's going to get worse, not better. By that I mean not only on the Facebook side in terms of leveraging AI, but on the advertising side in terms of leveraging AI to advertise, but also just to create social chaos. Like the internet has really been weaponized, near as we can see, by almost everybody around the world, and they're getting really good at it. And I would argue that it's been weaponized by Facebook as well, for a specific political agenda. What that agenda entirely isn't clear, but it's for a political agenda. So we're all worried about that, and it's no longer just a function of a reviewer or a critic saying, I'm going to report you for saying harassing speech or untrue speech. We now have AIs fighting these wars in real time. And so Facebook has been censoring and kicking off the platform for the last year or two. People whom at the time Facebook will say, well, you don't fact check, you're spreading misinformation. Then we all discover 5 months later that information was accurate. And to the extent they do that is to the extent that they are repositioning their platform back to what it originally was. It was originally a place to sort of connect with friends and family and share photos. And to the extent it grew into a marketplace for ideas, which I think helped it become big and important, I believe they're undercutting that. And so they're turning it back into a place for reaching out friends and sharing photos.
All right. So what are some of the most important lessons about using Facebook today to get your message out?
I'm going to say the most important lesson is you need to take seriously Facebook as an advertising platform. And John, I saw something just recently. I always go out and continue to take classes, and somebody was offering like, I'm going to show you how to get great business leads through LinkedIn. So I'm like, all right, this is going to be great. I'm going to learn how to get great business leads through it. I attended, the free webinar, the pre-sale thing, and I was enjoying it. Guess what the secret was for how to get great LinkedIn leads?
I would assume it's Facebook.
It was advertise on Facebook to your business customers, and then as a function of the funnel, take them to LinkedIn, where you can now have your offer and you have that established business. By the way, I think this is the most genius technique I've heard of in a while, where you take them to LinkedIn. Once you go to LinkedIn, you switch your brain, right? Because if you go to Facebook to stop thinking, usually when you're on LinkedIn, you go there to think. But that's why the typical business person's only on there 20 some minutes a week, because they don't want to think that hard, right? They're on Facebook for hours. So they're like, run them an ad on Facebook, put your proposition up so that they can see it. And at a certain point, take them to LinkedIn. Now you have this additional social proof, this business credibility, your offer there, and they've set it up so that you can connect into the offer from the LinkedIn page. But they were literally turning a LinkedIn page into a landing page in some regards for a Facebook ad. And I thought it was all brilliant. But at the core, it was spend your advertising dollars on Facebook.
Yeah, my belief, that's a clever one. I think I'm going to try that one.
Yeah, I haven't tried it yet.
Yeah, I'm taking notes on that one. I think the most important thing, especially having done the whole, run for, I hate to say it, but a decade of working with all these men's clinics. And all I can tell you is that at one point in time, Facebook allowed all kinds of things to be put up there, that you could, have, certain homebrew remedies, and, it would bring, make you as, virile as when you were 18 and all these other things. I mean, Sandra's married, so she has to cover her sensitive ears and everything. But it's just, but now you can't say anything at all. And I'm just always reminded of why I went out and bought radio time and did a show, which will give you an idea of what you can and cannot do, and why this is an important thing. And this isn't Facebook related, but this is life related. And we'll see if Tom agrees. So if I wanted to run an ad on a Phoenix radio station, and I wanted to use words that, I think are the right kind of words, but if I said erectile dysfunction, I could say that. But by the way, that's a euphemism for impotence, because no man wants to hear that word, because that's the I word. But more importantly, is that there is an organ which is impotent, which is called a penis. Now, if you said penis, I know, Sandra, this might be new to you, so I'm hanging with you. But if I said this, and she's very hard to make her blush, but if I said that ad would not go, because the Federal Trade Commission says, wait a second, you can't, and FCC, you can't say that on the radio. However, if I went out and bought a half hour or an hour's worth of time and had a urologist on, we are talking about things way out of that whole realm, because it was free speech, First Amendment, all of that, as long as we made sure that we said, this is who our sponsor is, this is what, this is, and they're not controlling this, but we could use all those words and many others and all that. So I think in Facebook, you have to think about what are the constraints, and don't ever look at those constraints as ending your campaign, but really think of it as how do I work within those constraints. Would you agree with that, Tom?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm reminded of a statement by Penn and Teller about like why he doesn't gamble. And he's like, I don't like playing someone else's game. Right? Whenever you're using an advertising platform, by definition, you're playing someone else's game.
Right.
and they change the rules of that game all the time. And in Facebook, they change the rules of that game almost in real time. You don't even know how the rules are changed from day to day and hour to hour and minute to minute. So you got to be careful. And this goes way back, John, to when I first met you in working with Perry Marshall, and the advice that you folks gave way back 10, 15 years ago. You're like, don't be dependent on a single advertising platform. And if you've managed to launch your business and you use Facebook well, and you launch your business and the money's just rolling in, your first task is to figure out another way to find those leads so it's not just Facebook, or you're crazy. And that's still true today, right? It's
Very much so. Yeah, very much so.
All right. So what are the biggest current traps in Facebook?
So there was a chapter in the first edition of the book. It might even be in this Japanese version. I don't know. But that they removed, some of the folks who were doing the editing in the second edition removed, and I'm still ticked off that this was removed. But the biggest trap, and the chapter was entitled "Batten Down the Hatches," and the biggest trap or risk for anyone new to Facebook is spending too much money accidentally. So I wrote a whole chapter called "Batten Down the Hatches" because I was talking to people in real time, and I still talk to them today. And they're like, I just spent 20 grand and I didn't get a real result in Facebook. And I'm like, well, that was an expensive lesson to learn for 20 grand. You could have probably learned that for $50. So batten down the hatches was pay attention to what platforms you're choosing to advertise on, and to how much you're spending, and to run. They'll default you into the biggest, most expensive, you're going to advertise everywhere. And unfortunately, your advertising agencies will sell this to you as well. And the reality is, Facebook is a direct marketing tool where you can spend as little as $50 to learn how to run an ad and make it successful, or at least $50 at a time. So if you spend 50 and nothing happens, make a change before you spend the next 50. You got a lot of chances to make a change if you're going to spend 20 grand that way, to hone in on something that's more likely to work for you. And so the biggest trap is not paying attention to how much money you're spending and the results you're getting.
Well, it sounds like my first edition book now has just gone up in value for those of you who want to get that chapter. I mean, I can't sell you the book, but I can rent it to you. Let's just put it that way. And we would have to get a deposit on that. To me, my thinking of the biggest traps that people run into is the fact of they don't think through a campaign before they run it. Every turnaround I've ever done, I've walked in and I've looked at, and it isn't all about driving to the cheapest lead. It's finding the lead that you can convert, that turns into profit, turns into money. But the mistake that I see people do all the time is that what they do is they go, well, we're going to go and I'll tell a Vegas story. So Mario Puzo wrote The Godfather, and this guy was a poor, broke guy living on Long Island, and in his basement he had, just like the FBI would have, he had all of these, all these bulletin boards, and he had 3x5 cards laying out the entire book, or books as it is, which is The Godfather's a mammoth novel. And he hit it big, and Mario hit it big and later in life, and he went a little funny in the head. So what happened is that he ended up, he goes to Vegas, everybody in Vegas at that point in time, hey, Mario, hey, yeah. So he ends up owing a lot of money, and he ends up having to pay back some people money for some gambling debts. So he ends up writing the script to Superman, because he is a good writer. He wrote the script to Superman, so he would essentially, it was a way to get enough money to pay back his gambling debts to some guys you don't want to owe money to. Friend of his says, Mario, why don't we do this? Why don't we get a stretch limo? We'll get a stretch limo. We'll open up the moonroof in the back, and we can go get some pros, go get some hookers, all that stuff, And instead of you going to the tables, we'll slowly drive down Las Vegas Boulevard. I'll hand you handfuls of cash and you can stand up and just throw it in the air, and you'll lose money less, less quickly. Well, don't be Mario Puzo is the whole thing, in the sense of throwing your money away, because people do that. And we could use another metaphor, but that's a good one, because people throw their money away in advertising, and then they say the following dumbest thing, and see if Tom agrees with this, which is, well, Facebook, and I'm going to use a little bad English. So, okay. So some of you just, grammar people out there, Facebook don't work. It sucks. It'll never work. I had a buddy who did the same thing, and it don't work for him neither. So all I'm telling you is that if you're throwing money away, it's not because of the platform. It's because you haven't figured it out. What do you think, Tom? Am I on the right track?
I was going to volunteer the words. I was going to say, when you said, they're going to say, Facebook doesn't work. And in the earliest times when I first started working with folks and doing consulting around Facebook advertising, I would like, well, show me what you did. And they're like, well, I ran this ad, and then I had an audience, and the ad was converting, and it ran for like 2 months, and it was doing really well, and then it stopped working. So Facebook doesn't work. And I'm like, you're not describing that Facebook doesn't work. You're describing how Facebook works. Right? Ads don't run. It's a very different platform than Google. It's more akin to television. There's an aspect of creative repetition in it. And you shouldn't expect a single ad to continue to work forever, like you often did in Google AdWords. So a lot of times when people say Facebook doesn't work, it's like, you don't understand. It's why we wrote the book. It's why we wrote the book. It's why the books are still out there. It's why they're still in print. Entrepreneur Press is still publishing them after 11 years. There's a difference to how Facebook works and how you engage an audience in that platform, and you need to learn that to use it effectively. And what you bring to Facebook advertising that you may be picked up in another world may not be relevant. You might literally be using Facebook correctly, and you lose the opportunity because you're like, it worked for 2 months and then it stopped, so I gave up. I'm like, well, no, that was the time to understand what you need to do in Facebook after 2 months.
Well, and I'll inject this one little piece. What I think I would add to that is that you need to be able to tell stories in Facebook. If you're going to entertain people, it isn't saying, buy my shit, buy it now, buy. That isn't a very cool story. It's kind of a short story, but what it will do is you're not going to necessarily going to have this long-term connection with people and not move it along. I mean, so, and I'll give everybody from antiquity, go Google, go to YouTube, go find the Taster's Choice television campaigns from the 70s, and you'll find that they did all of these ongoing ads, and there was ongoing story about instant coffee. How do I know it worked? Because they increased their market share, and people used to talk about these stories. I was young at the time, but I said, wait a second, whenever somebody talks about a commercial, I want to capture its essence. So go check that out. All right, Tom, I know we're running tight on time. Sandra, what do we have to wrap us up?
All right, so I'm going to need some predictions. Where will Facebook be in the next 1 to 5 years?
So I'm gonna give a couple probabilities on some predictions, just because I think we're in this sort of technological world. There's opportunities for massive change that we don't quite recognize. So I would say there's a 15 to 20% probability that Facebook barely exists in 5 years. That's a small one, but a real probability that it goes away. I would say, there's probably a 70% probability that it looks an awful lot like it looks today in 5 years. That it continues to run, it continues to engage people. They maybe figure out how to balance the issue of driving people away through censorship. They find some sort of balance there. So about a 70% chance that it looks a lot like what it does today. And the remaining percentages, about 15%, is that a competitor comes along and we're beginning to move our data, our historical data off of Facebook. You can download it, and we're beginning to move it into multiple other platforms. Facebook still exists, but we stopped using it as a repository for our data and information. And so it becomes less relevant. So 70%, it's as relevant as it is today. 15% at least that it's not even in existence in 5 years. We literally watched MySpace go away. We've watched a lot of major digital properties go away in real time. And anyone in this business knows that that can happen to them. And they're fighting it, but it's real. And in my opinion, that percentage shouldn't be nearly as high as it is, but it's a direct function of Facebook choosing to become a political entity.
So I'll take a little bit different glance, because Tom really is the Facebook expert. But that's the best part about being a prognosticator. And it's the old thing of, if you're making predictions without putting up money, then well, we all know what that's all about. First off, calling this thing the metaverse and going to this new kind of generic sounding and trying to define a new position, I think is a very risky move, because Facebook, people know what it is. Now Google turned it to Alphabet, and and who knows where that's going to go. But again, it's more straightforward than that. But I think that Facebook has especially if they keep pushing for a higher regulatory barrier, be careful what you ask for, because you might actually get it. And if you end up becoming the truth detectives globally, you will find out that there are lots of different truths. There's lots of different what people consider misinformation, and you'll get yourself in trouble. I think that Facebook's biggest threat, if I can call it that, is the fact that they do not understand who their customers are. And they don't respect their customers, the people who pay the money so they can have all the cool stuff and they can work on all the cool stuff. And I think that's their biggest threat. Their biggest opportunity is that they find new ways to connect more people, because they still have billions of more people that they can go out and pull together. However, I think you're going to see a balkanization, that's a fancy way of saying fracturing, that's going to take place, because I think that I think it's going to become very digitally tribalism that's going to take place. And when that happens, then Facebook loses specific types of markets. In my career, I have seen people who decided that they were going to take a stand, and doggone it, I'm going to take a stand. I'm going to go put something out there and I'm going to take a stand. And that's great. But every time you do, just understand, when you say yes to somebody, you say no to somebody else. Now, if that's what you want to do, if that's what your niche is going to be, then that's great. But I think they've kind of fallen into it, and they're doing it not out of forethought, but reaction. And whenever you are in that reactive state, you become vulnerable. And the vulnerability just transcends so many things. In fact, what it does is it puts you in a position where those who are giving you money walk away. I'm seeing it in YouTube. YouTube is doing a lot of very stupid things. And we're on YouTube. So if, who knows, the bot listens to this, and then, there'll be a black helicopter outside my window tomorrow or something. But what I'm going to tell you is that they're doing, Facebook is starting to do some of the same silly things. And I'll give you the worst one, which is when you take big money advertisers who will pay for slots, lots and lots and lots of slots. What you discover is you don't have enough slots. So you start doing what's called breakage. And breakage is that I'm seeing right now Pampers ads. Now, I don't know why they think I need Pampers. And we're not talking, we're talking about Pampers for little ones, not big ones.
Good. How old are you, John?
Or what kind of strange fetish they think I've got, but I'm not into that. But the thing is that breakage is going to ruin it, because advertisers won't put up with it for long. So that's kind of my sense of it. So I just want to thank Tom. Tom, any last few words before we do a final wrap up?
You're welcome. No, it's been great to be here. I guess my final word I would be encouraging most people to spend less time on Facebook as a user and more time on Facebook as an advertiser. So recognize that it's not really a platform for the users, it's a platform for the advertisers. And by that, I mean, you're the commodity if you're using Facebook. And most likely for your own mental health, spend as little time on social media as possible.
There you go. Well, don't bite the hand that feeds us too much, but let's see if we can use some of these ideas. So I want to thank, of course, my good friend Tom Malash, our super secret special guest, to be our first guest on Raging Verbalist. I mean, and we did 114 of them before this, but then we broke down. We needed it for this special occasion. Happy birthday, by the way, to Facebook. I mean, the fact that you made it from 2004 to 2022. I mean, that's 18 years is astonishing in the digital world, because I can tell you from all the years I've been in high tech, there are lots of names that I could throw out that people would go, what? And you would have to like really dig in the internet to find out about them. So I want to thank Tom for coming on. And of course, the ever lovely Sandra for putting up with us and making sure that we stayed on the path and move forward. And with that, I just want to say one thing, and that is go out there and do what you need to do for your business. Go out and do that, what you are capable of doing. But most importantly, choose wisely, be smart, use Facebook for what it is, which is an advertising vehicle. If you're wrapped up in the politics of it, hey, I'm a hardcore libertarian, so they do enough stuff to piss me off, but I am never so turned off that I don't understand the value of it. So go out there and have a great one, and you'll be hearing you of it. So go out there and have a great one, and you'll be hearing from the Raging Verbalist soon.